Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 28 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. I had such a great discussion with Perri Chinalai of StoryCorps and Maria Collins of the New York Life Foundation for this episode. StoryCorps is a nonprofit based in New York, and basically they bring people together, regular people like you and me, and have them talk with each other to record and preserve their stories and their life experiences. And when I say preserve their stories, I really mean just that. Anyone's recordings can be archived at the Library of Congress and available for generations to come. I invited StoryCorps to talk with me for this episode because they have a special project right now to bring together grieving parents and their kids to talk about their loved ones and their experiences of loss. New York Life, which has a long-standing and deep commitment to the field of children's bereavement, partnered with StoryCorps on this project. I'm so happy they were able to join this discussion to talk about the Road to Resilience project, as well as many of the other projects they are partnering on, and the childhood bereavement resources available on their website. Some of the things we talked about include: what is the StoryCorps Road to Resilience project and who are their current partners? What it means to families to be able to have these conversations with each other, how families near New York City, Houston, Portland, Louisville, Baltimore, and Traverse City, Michigan can get involved with the first 6 organizations partnering on this project, the Toolkit that StoryCorps will have available in fall 2019 for additional organizations to utilize, the StoryCorps app that anyone can download to record their own stories, tips for conducting a StoryCorps-style conversation in your own home, why it's so important to New York Life to support the field of childhood bereavement, additional bereavement resources that New York Life offers free of charge on their website, the Coalition to Support Grieving Students and their Grief-Sensitive Schools initiative, and some results of the recent childhood bereavement study conducted by New York Life. We also have a special treat for listeners. We get to listen to 2 of the StoryCorps Road to Resilience recordings, including the new animation just released this week in honor of Father's Day. I think this project is fantastic, and I'm so happy to highlight what they're doing and how you can get involved. I hope you enjoy my discussion with StoryCorps and the New York Life Foundation. My guests today are Perri Chinalai from StoryCorps and Maria Collins from the New York Life Foundation, joining from their respective offices in New York City. Maria and Perri, welcome.
Hello. Hello. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be talking with both of you today about the StoryCorps Road to Resilience project, which has been created by StoryCorps in partnership with the New York Life Foundation. So let's just jump right in here. Let's start out by playing for listeners the brand new animation that your team has put out in honor of Father's Day, which is, of course, coming up this next weekend here. So for listeners, just to give you a little background, so this is a discussion between Asia Khan and her father, Carmichael Khan, and they're talking about her favorite memories of her mother, Rose, who died when Asia was 14. And their discussion was recorded at Bo's Place in Houston, Texas. So here we go.
What are some of the favorite stories about Mom?
She hated doing my hair. Every time I would ask her to try something different, oh, Mom, I want bangs, or oh, Mom, I want my hair like this. She said, Asia, you ain't going to have this hairstyle for long because you're too rambunctious and you'll sweat it out anyway.
What do you miss most about her?
She wasn't just my mother. She was always somebody I can confide in regards to my confidence, just every little thing. I remember one time I was crying. I was saying, oh, Mom, am I ugly? Kids were making fun of my eyebrows. And she said, Asia, am I ugly? And I said, no. She said, well, then you're not ugly because you came from me. You can't be ugly. And just something as simple as that just made me feel special.
And one of the things that I miss most about her is her own sense of connection to the animals.
Yeah. She had a very special relationship with Toto. You know, of course she loved him, but he loved her as well. I remember after she passed, he would loyally just wait for her to come home. I think until the day we moved from the house, he waited every day, halfway expecting her to just open the door. And when he died a few years ago, that was another hit to us because it felt like another part of her was gone. That was a unique kind of pain.
The hardest thing that I had to cope with was the sound of your crying. When you missed your mom and you were crying in the night, it was very hard for me to listen to that. And I could not get over that for quite a while. It hurt me because it's a sound of heartbreak.
There were a lot of things I missed about her not being gone. The major events that happened in my life, graduation, just any kind of milestone that happened, whether it was a new relationship or just me growing and seeing changes around me, just wanting to ask her questions about how she reacted to the same changes I had. Based on everything that I remember about her and the effort she put into what she was passionate about, she definitely would probably want to be remembered as a good mom. And I think she did succeed with that. And I hope she knows that.
Okay, we're back. And what a great discussion for this father and daughter to be able to have. For me, I think the part where Asia talks about the dog waiting every day for her mom to come back, and then when Carmichael talks about how hard it was to hear his daughter crying at night, I really think it's great that you guys are providing this way for this father and daughter to come together and to have this conversation with each other and to remember her mom and his wife. So thank you guys for doing this. Okay, so Perri, before we get into the Road to Resilience project specifically, so first of all, can you tell us what is StoryCorps?
Sure. So StoryCorps is a nonprofit organization, and it's based on a really very simple idea. It was started 16 years ago by a radio documentarian named Dave Isay, and we started with a soundproof recording studio in Grand Central Terminal, which many of your listeners will know as one of the busiest travel hubs in the country.
Yes,
so tucked in the corner of this big commuter center was this little booth where you could bring anyone that you want to honor, like a parent, a friend, a grandparent, to this booth to listen to their story. And the idea is that you come to the booth with your loved one, like say your grandmother, and you're met by a facilitator who works for StoryCorps. And you record for 40 minutes about the things that matter most to you. And at the end of the 40 minutes, participants get a copy, and another copy goes to the Library of Congress so that your great-great-great-great-great grandkids can get to know you and your interview partner through their voice and story.
The Library of Congress, that's a big deal.
It is. It's part of the permanent collection of the American Folk Life Center at the Library of Congress.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's it's amazing to be able to go and listen to all of these voices there. Right now, the archive includes more than 500,000 participants, and it's one of the largest collection of voices ever gathered.
Wow.
And the idea is that sitting with someone you care about and asking them who they are and how they want to be remembered reminds them that they matter and that they won't be forgotten. So overall, what we're trying to do at StoryCorps is provide access to the experience of sitting across from somebody that you love and asking them questions that matter.
And you guys have moved out of Grand Central Station and are doing this much more broadly, right?
Yes. So we moved the booth from Grand Central Station down to downtown New York City by Foley Square at the bottom of the courthouse steps. We also have booths in Atlanta and in Chicago. And we have a traveling Airstream trailer that will park in cities from 3 to 6 weeks at a time to record conversations of the local community members. We also do hundreds of partnerships a year with different types of organizations. So we collect stories in a variety of different ways.
Super cool. And I think you do something on the radio each week, right? What do you do?
Yeah, so in addition to providing access to the experience, we're also trying to provide access to the stories that we record. So a very small percentage of the interviews that we're recording in our booths and with partnerships are turned into 2.5-minute segments that can be played in a variety of settings. The thing we're most known for is a small running segment that is on National Public Radio's Morning Edition every Friday mornings, where you'll hear about 2.5 minutes from the 40-minute conversation.
Okay, super cool. All right. So with this broader context of StoryCorps then, what is the Road to Resilience project?
Sure. So Road to Resilience is a project in partnership with the New York Life Foundation to record the stories of kids grieving the death of somebody who's important to them. It's really meant to give them a space to talk about who they are and share their grief stories and grief journeys and memories of the important person in their lives. So it's a pretty multifaceted program that began in 2017 and includes really rich collaborations with bereavement centers all over the country to record kids and families. So through this program, we're creating resources for bereavement centers that are interested in starting recording programs, and we're producing a lot of audio and animations that can be played for kids to both help them feel less alone in their journeys, but also potentially help in generating dialogue around grief. Right now, as you had mentioned earlier, we have the animation launching this week, but we've just finalized 3 of them and are providing discussion guides for those animations so that anybody who's serving kids in grief could, play these animations and then have, conversations about them and have some of the questions right there for them.
Meaning like if a grief center somewhere in the country had a kids group or a teens group that met regularly, that they might then bring one of these stories in, play it. There's not somebody connected with their, not part of their circle, but one of your stories, play it and have almost like a book club, like a discussion.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I think it's bereavement centers, but it can also be broader than that. So we're envisioning that possibly school groups or church groups or other places that are serving kids but aren't necessarily known to be grief centers, like YMCAs and YWCAs and, and other spaces where kids who are grieving go and could benefit from hearing other kids' stories.
That's really cool. And to bring some of these grief discussions more into the broader community, maybe change the way, maybe make it more open for people to talk about. I like that. That's really cool. So, Maria, let's bring you in here. I'm guessing that, you guys have done a major study of childhood bereavement and some of the needs, and I'm guessing you're seeing a real need for this type of discussion.
Absolutely. Actually, in 2017, we did a bereavement study, and we wanted to find out what are the gaps, but also what were people that lost their parent or sibling at a younger age, what was their experience? And 95% agreed that after a parent died, they had no one to talk to. People shied away from them. And I think that's very telling. And also, we also found that 68% said that it would have been easier to cope if people in society were more readily able to talk about bereavement.
Yeah, such a good point. And I would guess that a lot of my listeners anecdotally have some of these same observations based on their own experiences so far with their families and their grief.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. And I may have not mentioned yet, you guys are majorly involved in this. I think you guys are the biggest corporate funder of childhood bereavement programs and activities and so forth and so on in the country, right?
We are. We got into childhood bereavement about a decade ago, and we invested $40 million, but that doesn't tell our whole story. I think we're more than just an investor or a grant maker. We really partner with our organizations to find gaps and needs to provide those resources. And we provide tons of free resources, both through our website and with our partners, to ensure that we're not just funding a project that's only for one center, but it really impacts the entire field. And then also through our website, we provide tips and downloadable information that are created by experts in the field. And we do want to elevate that conversation. And that's why we did partner with StoryCorps. And this project in particular really provides that outlet of saying, you know what, this is a public priority. You know, through our research with Judy's House, we launched last year the childhood bereavement estimation model, which stated that 1 in 15 children will lose a parent or sibling by the age of 18.
Wait. 1 in 15 children by the age of 18 will either lose a parent or a sibling.
Right, and that number doubles by the age of 25.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. That's a big number.
It is a big number, and that doesn't include, as Perri was saying, this is about anyone that the child loses. It could be a grandparent, it could be a best friend, it could be an uncle, a godmother, whoever it is. You know, so the 1 in 15 is only parent and sibling. Imagine if we account for a friend or grandparent.
Yeah, I think it's terrific that you guys are putting so much into this. And I think it makes a lot of sense with the StoryCorps project because you guys have a long depth and breadth in childhood bereavement, and they have major storytelling knowledge and expertise. So bringing you guys together, it's really cool.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful partnership because we are providing an outlet. We're providing a safe space to really have an honest conversation about that person. And sometimes, you know, as you saw in the Con animation, they didn't want to ask those questions maybe before. It was a way for them to talk about things that were on their mind, but they weren't given the opportunity or the safe space. Now they were. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what society needs is like, can we have that conversation? We both experienced that loss, but in different ways, because no one experienced loss the same way.
Right. And so you guys, so Perri, so you guys, I think right now have about a half a dozen different partner organizations that you've gone into so far to bring the StoryCorps model and specifically for Road to Resilience into their groups. So what are you doing with these groups? How does that work?
Yeah, so we're currently recording with 6 different organizations around the country, and I'm so happy to give them a little shout out because they're amazing.
Yes,
but we're we're partnering with Bo's Place in Houston and Dougie Center in Portland, Hospice in Louisville, A Caring Hand in New York City, Roberta's House in Baltimore, and Michael's Place in Traverse City. And so we've been working with them over the last 9 months plus to train their staff to go out and record the kids and families that they serve. As opposed to StoryCorps staff, being the facilitators, we're actually trained their staff to be the facilitators. And we did this for a few different reasons. One is for flexibility, and, giving them the equipment and kind of the knowledge to record these conversations allows for families to decide when is best for them over a 6-month period of time. For the families, they have a staff person who they know in the space with them. I think that this is a type of programming that can just kind of add to their already rich work that they're doing. And so the trainings happened over a 4-day period, and then, we give them the equipment, and we've connected all of the partners with one another so that they can share best practices. And at the end of their recording periods, we're going to give them all one StoryCorps clip, StoryCorps style clip for them to share in different ways, like on their website or in support groups and other educational settings. And that clip will come directly from one of the families that they're serving.
So all the families that record their stories during this time period you'll pick one of those and turn it into one of these 2 or 3 minute clips that the center can use to, that's cool. And
for each of the partners,
Right.
and also share amongst ourselves. So, already we're thinking about creating a Spanish language clip that, all of the centers can play for their families, who receive services primarily in Spanish. And we're talking about the different types of pairings that should be part of this collection to really represent the kind of wide diversity of the participants.
Sure, the families, the particular losses, all the different situations.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask before I forget. So the families that come in to and work with their grief center to record these stories, do their stories automatically go to the Library of Congress, or do they have some choice in what happens with their story?
Yeah, that's a great question. They do have a choice. They can decide that they want to keep that story for themselves and to just share with their immediate family. But then they also can share it with the world and share it with the Library of Congress. And I would say that for the most part, families are coming to this project with an interest not only to share their stories and kind of build that connection through the experience of the interview, but also because they want to they want to connect with others, and they say if our story can help anyone else, we want to do it. So for the most part, they are wanting to archive it, add it to the kind of fabric of stories that is already in the Library of Congress, and share it with their community.
Yeah. Okay. And approximately how many stories do you think you've recorded so far with the partners that you have now?
Well, we just recorded over 100 stories over the last I would say 9 months. And of those stories, we've seen so many different types of pairings. These are kids talking with their parents, they're kids talking with their siblings, they're talking to the bereavement professionals, and so we've seen all different types of configurations. Mm-hmm.
Any jump out at you, either one of you, as particularly touching or remarkable?
Well, I can speak to that. Our second animation features a 10-year-old boy named Ibukun talking with his sister Alice, and they're remembering their mom who died. And Alice talks about taking care of Ibukun when their mom died as a 14-year-old, and how he was just this bright light for her at a really dark time. And Alice talks about how she still talks to her mom's photo and opens the door for conversations with her brother in a way I don't think she had before. And she even said in the conversation and in the animation that this is the first time they had talked about their mom in that way.
Mm.
And I'm going to chime in here. The feedback because many, all of the partners that are participating in this are also our partners in the foundation. And I've received, calls and emails from the center and the center staff just saying how this project has really impacted the families, wanting to record this and really having, the opportunity to say things that have been on their mind. And I mean, when I read the emails or I talk to, like, for instance, Bo's Place, we played the audio clip of the cons at the National Alliance for Grieving Children symposium last year. And I received a note from the cons and just thanking us for being part of this project. And it's amazing. It made a huge difference within the center itself. It gave them another tool, another resource for people to connect, and also for them to express themselves in a very, I would say, honest way that sometimes you don't get the opportunity to do.
Yeah. Yeah, which could be because maybe parents and kids aren't. Sometimes I hear, someone doesn't want to upset the other one by maybe bringing up a topic. Sometimes it's maybe just in the busyness of everyday life, things don't come up. And so I think that you guys are creating this as a mechanism to really be a little more deliberate in in having these discussions. I think that's really cool.
After the cons were recorded at Bo's place, I know they reached out to Carmichael Kahn to see if he could offer any feedback, and I actually have his feedback. If it's okay, I can share it.
Yes, please.
With you, because I think it's really poignant and speaks to a couple of aspects of this program that we haven't touched on yet. But he said, we will continue to hold StoryCorps-style mini conversations with Rose's relatives and friends, if only to flesh out the larger narrative of her life, parts of which Asia can only now appreciate. We have an instinctual fear of forgetting, so we'll recommit ourselves to the documenting the journey of our lives with and without Rose's physical presence.
Oh, okay. He said a lot of really important things there.
He did. I mean, the things that stick out to me is that it sounds like this is just the beginning, and that they're going to be holding these types of conversations to kind of fill out the larger picture of her life. That's a really powerful sentiment, that this is, that this process is really just the beginning for them. And recommitting, the documentation process so that they don't forget, and that they have this fear of forgetting. And I think that is one aspect of this that we can provide to families who may have young kids in grief, who just may not remember their loved one as vividly as they do at this moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think sometimes I hear that kids, especially the younger they were when their parent died, they have a fear of forgetting, and that creates a whole nother level of grief. And I think he mentioned two different. I was expecting, maybe thinking, okay, if StoryCorps creates, then if for example the father and daughter continue their conversations amongst themselves, then that's a really good thing. But in your quote there, in his quote, you just mentioned, he said drawing in the rest of his late wife's family to help flesh out for his daughter their mother, her life, and all these things. I think that's really cool. So how often do you find that maybe this StoryCorps session, when you bring them together, is maybe the first time or one of the first times that the parents and kids have really sat down? Is that, commonly something you find?
Yes, I mean, we've seen it all. We've seen families that talk about, have these kinds of conversations all of the time, but aren't necessarily recording them. And then we see interviews where out of the 40 minutes, it takes 38 minutes to get to the question that this child really wants to ask. So we call it the hand on doorknob phenomenon, where you're about to hit the stop on the record button when a very poignant dialogue starts to emerge, in which case we'll let the tape roll a bit longer. But that's not uncommon. These are not easy conversations to have all of the time, and we totally understand that and try to create spaces that feel safe for people, and that that don't set it up as there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. And so what happens is that it often does take time. So yes, we've seen that new conversations or new memories come up that haven't been shared before, as well as old treasured ones. We've really seen the whole we've seen the whole spectrum.
Yeah. Okay, and so the name of the project is The Road to Resilience. So what have you guys learned from this project about helping kids be resilient in the face of the loss of one of their parents?
So I'm going to say that this really reaffirms what we're learning. And I say learning because New York Life and myself continues to listen to our partners in the field and saying, what are the gaps? What are the needs? And this reaffirms that kids, one, don't grieve alone, right? They want to be heard. They want to be supported. And they want an outlet for their grief. I mean, us partnering with StoryCorps, and also we partner with several other partners like the Alliance for Young Artists and Writers, it gives them a platform to tell their story. And that's something that we must value. because their perception is their story, and they need a safe space to do it. And I think the StoryCorps initiative really does provide that, because they get to pick the person who they want to talk to about the person they lost.
And they get to pick their questions, right? I mean, I think you guys have some suggestions or some, but yeah, they have free choice over the way the discussion goes.
Absolutely. And we say that the 40 minutes fully belongs to the participants. Everything that's in that space is suggested in terms of, different ways that they can take the conversation. And I think what's, quite powerful is just giving kids the opportunities to ask questions that are on their minds. And giving them that quiet space where your phone is off and you're looking directly across from one another.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about New York Life Foundation's role in this and more broadly with children's bereavement. So I think we've already talked about you guys partnered on this project to bring not only funding, but the relationships with the practitioners to really make this happen. Why is it so important to you guys as a company to really be deeply involved in this work?
I think it goes down to our core mission, right? We're a life insurance company, plain and simple. And we, unfortunately, insure people, and when there is a death, we have to deliver a death claim. We provide the financial security for whoever that loved one insured has the financial means to live. But we also want to make sure that they have the resources and the emotional support. So when we deliver a death claim, the check to a beneficiary, we also want them to know about resources like bereavement camps, like books, like articles, because we have a state-to-state bereavement listing on our website that gives them by state, what are the bereavement camps in your state, what are the bereavement centers, what are some great books that they can pick up and read, in addition to our own brochure and materials that they can either download or order for free. So it's a holistic approach to supporting our beneficiaries and also the public, because all of our resources are free.
I think that's so important what you just said, that resources maybe starts with that check, but there's so much more to it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I'm so glad that you guys are jumping in and filling that. You mentioned that there are some resources or some publications people can order from your website. Do you have an example of what you have there?
Oh, sure. So several years ago, we created a dedicated web page for our resources, achildingrief.com. Achildingrief.com was created with our partners. And we have tips, so they can download tips on like what to say, what not to say. We have how to deal with the holidays, because those are triggers that come up. Mother's Day is Father's Day, as we're talking about today, like launching the StoryCorps video to really offer that support. In addition, we have hard copies of supporting our student, supporting our child, which is made in partnership with the Coalition to Support Grieving Students. We have After a Loved One Dies. So there's several resources on our website that we encourage people to either download to get it right on demand, or they can order hard copies of these materials.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. I'll make sure to put a link in the show notes page, because I think, if people are looking for a place to start, not just start, but that sounds like it would be a really good jumping off point. And you mentioned the National Coalition, I might not get the name right, about the grieving students.
The National Coalition for Grieving Students.
Yeah. So what is that? You guys are a partner of theirs?
Yes. So we are a founding member of the coalition. The coalition started in 2013. We, with the National Center for School Crisis and Bereavement, convened 10 organizations, school unions. So like the AFT, the NEA, which are the teachers' unions, the mental health unions, like the social workers, the psychologists and counselors, school administrators, principals, superintendents, and school nurses. And over a 2-year period, we worked on an industry-endorsed resource. for educators, really to better equip them to support grieving students. Because as we all know, children, young people, spend most of their weekday in schools. Mm-hmm. And educators, through a survey with the AFT, really said that this is an issue we must address. 93% of them said, we think this is an important issue. We want the resources, because only 7%, when we did the survey, said they had any amount of bereavement training.
Only how many percent?
7.
7. Not 70. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7.
Huh. Okay. All right.
And if we go back to the statistic of 1 in 15,
yeah,
an average classroom has 25 students in it. So they have at least one student that might be grieving, whether they lost their parent or sibling that year or they lost them 3 years ago. Something in that school might trigger them. If you go on grievingstudents.org, you'll see modules that talk about what to say, what not to say, triggers. But these are actual students, educators, family members that have dealt with this and offering practical advice. And one of the videos mentions, like, there was this young student in science class, and they were talking about aneurysms. Her father died of one. So she wasn't able to focus that day or the day after because the teacher was unaware that that's the situation that happened to her. So providing educators with an industry-endorsed resource is something that we thought is a gap we needed to fill.
Yeah.
So we did work with them. We launched grievingstudents.org in 2015. And then a couple of years later, we had to continue with dissemination. And New York Life really thought about, how can we get this to the local schools? Because that's what it's about. And so we developed a program called Grief Sensitive Schools, where we train our folks in giving a small presentation, 15 minutes or less, where they talk about, one, the issue of grief in schools and the resources, free resources. And I have to stress free, because that's what we're about. Free resources that are available to educators in school communities. And our goal in this is really for every school to become and strive to become grief sensitive. And that's just like being aware that this is an issue that affects their learning, that can impact their day, and being sensitive to the fact that, you know what, if it's Mother's Day, plan an activity that is open-ended so no one feels like they're not included.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really neat. And just to reiterate, you guys aren't selling a program to the school. You're giving them free information. Plus, I think it actually is kind of the opposite, right? Don't you have a program where you might actually support them?
Yes, we do. So part of them striving to be grief sensitive, if they make the pledge to strive to be grief sensitive, every school that has this presentation will receive a $500 grant. Mm. And it really helps them and supports them in striving to be grief sensitive. We know without some financial support, like getting books or getting training into their school community, things like that wouldn't happen without some financial support. So we wanted to ensure that we're jumpstarting their way of being grief sensitive through this grant program.
Okay. And just to clarify, I know you're based in New York, but this is not just available to schools in New York, right? It's nationwide? It's
nationwide. We have offices in every state.
Gotcha.
And this is really at the fabric of our employee engagement. We try, as a partner, we try to match our grantees with our local offices where they can get to know who our grantees are, and if possible, volunteer with them. Many of our folks actually volunteer with our camps, our bereavement camps, or in an after-school program. So we want it to be more about the relationship and not just about the grant.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we'll make sure to put links where people can find the school resources and the other resources you guys have. That's really neat and something that I think listeners could potentially approach their own schools and say, hey, do you guys know about this? Maybe we should look into this and, bring some of the programming in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So bringing it back to StoryCorps and the Road to Resilience project. So Perri, you talked about how so far you've got 6 partners, and you mentioned the different cities they're in. So I guess my first question is, if someone's listening and happens to be near one of those cities, I guess, is there a way for them to participate somehow in this project at this time?
Yeah, we would encourage those individuals to get in touch with the partner organizations that I had listed out earlier. They're also located on our website, should they want bereavement services and or to connect up with StoryCorps. But we also have other ways that families can record conversation, including using the StoryCorps app, which anybody can download from their iTunes store or wherever they get their apps.
Okay, wait a second. StoryCorps has an app, so that's cool. So this thing you guys do that has fancy recording studios and projects and all this, I think you're saying that individuals can participate as well on their own?
Yes. So anybody can download our app and record a conversation today. Also, through the Road to Resilience, we are creating an online toolkit that we're going to be making available to organizations who are interested in either starting their own programming or watching and listening to our animations and audio. So all of that will be available both on our website, but then also through this online toolkit.
Okay. Do you have an approximate target of when the online toolkit might be available?
Yes, this fall. We're going to be launching in either late September or October.
Gotcha. Okay. So if anyone's listening and is working with a different grief center, not one of your current partners, in their own locations, they could, potentially talk with them about checking out the online toolkit and thinking about whether they want to bring that into their group as well.
Yes, it's going to be a pretty rich toolkit with a lot of different resources for either starting their own recording programs or using the content in their educational services.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, that's cool. And so I'm still thinking about this app and thinking how neat that is that you guys have the, democratizing it, if you will, bringing it down to, so an individual in their living room can pull up their smartphone, download your app. Do you have any tips maybe for how to facilitate a conversation with their kids, in their own families, in their own living rooms? Anything that you've learned from this project that might help people who want to give that a try?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've learned a lot through doing these interviews. I would say the first thing is that preparation is key. We encourage all of our families to really think about what they want this 40 minutes to be. So we ask, what are the 5 things that you want to talk about? And what do you not want to talk about? That's a really important question before hitting the record button. We suggest that participants identify their first 3 questions each, so that, when they hit record, they kind of know and can expect what's coming. We ask if there's anything they've wanted to say to one another. We encourage them also, if they're individuals who are recording at home, and they have somebody else who provides support to them, like either a bereavement professional or just somebody who's close to them who plays a supportive role, maybe inviting them to come to the space to help with the recording. I think mementos can go a long way, photographs or other objects that they can talk about during their conversation. I think when you're recording on the app, adding a little formality can make it feel special. So, really thinking about the audio quality and this as a bit of a time capsule without adding pressure, or without, making it feel like there's a right way to do it. Just doing some things to make it a really nice recording that they want to share and they want to listen to, for years to come. And then, the other 2 things that we've learned and that over the years at StoryCorps is, to follow that I pass rule that, nobody has to talk about anything they don't want to talk about, certainly not on tape. And that sitting in silence is okay. That is absolutely all right for a recording and can say so much about the dynamic and the relationship and the memories.
Yeah. Okay. And if a family records with the StoryCorps app, then what happens to the recording?
So they can make a decision as to whether or not they want to keep it on their app, an archive page, or if they want to archive it with the world, and have it also at the permanent collection at the Library of Congress.
Wait. My own conversation that I record with my own kids in my own living room, I could actually submit it to part of this Library of Congress collection?
You could, yes.
Huh, that is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But it's not required, I think you said, if somebody wants to keep it for themselves and their families, they have that option.
Exactly. So it's not required. They create their own unique username and password on the app, and then are able to store as many interviews as they like without publishing them.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, that's really cool. I mean, I like how you guys have this on so many levels, right? The more formal, through your partners, come in, sit down with fancy equipment, and then all the way, down to and including individuals in their living rooms. That's just super cool. I'm so glad we're talking about this today.
So are we.
So we're actually approaching the end of our time here, sadly. But before we end, I know you guys did you've done a bunch of stories, but another special one that you did last November as part of Children's Grief Awareness Month. You did an animation based on a recording that you had done. So I'd like to play that for listeners now. And so this is Sasha Evans and her mom, Olivia Evans. And they're talking about the loss of Sasha's dad, Ernie. And this was recorded at the Trista Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
What do you think you miss most about Dad?
Just him being there. It was always great.
Dad's been gone 3.5 years. What would you say to him, maybe, if you could?
Well, I'm a teenager. I'm sure he would tease me about that.
It's funny. He always would find people in crowds and say, that looks like what Olivia's going to look like. He was proud. Very, very proud. You said you remembered the day that we found out Dad did die. You want to talk about that or not?
The night before, I was in my bed and I'd heard the ice go off in the refrigerator. And I was like, what in the world? Is someone up? And so I got up and it was Dad. He said, hey, Olivia, do you want some cereal? And I said, sure. We got some Cheerios and we just ate our Cheerios together. I remember that I stayed home from school because I was playing hooky. And you came in my room. You were on the phone and you were crying and you told me to get dressed and get in the car. We got to the hospital. I didn't know what was going on. I had overheard enough conversation that I figured out that Dad had died. And I was holding back tears. That's all I remember.
He was such a larger-than-life personality. And he'd just finished his doctorate. And he just had a baby. It was just terrible. Anything that you want to share about what you've learned from having to face grief as a young person?
Talking about it is one of the best things you can do. And it's not going to feel that way at all. Because you want to keep to yourself and say nothing and do nothing and just sit there for weeks and just cry. But it's just so much better when you talk to someone else. Crying together is so much better than crying alone.
Okay, and we're back. What a great discussion. Thank you for sharing that with us. I really love how this project is bringing grieving kids and their surviving parent together to talk. And I really think that Olivia says it best in this story when she said talking about it is one of the best things that you can do. And then she said, it's so much better when you talk to someone else. And I'm thinking maybe that sums up like what is so powerful about this whole project. And so we're reaching the end of our time today, so I just have one last question for each of you here. If you could say one thing to widowed parents, maybe something you learned from the Road to Resilience Project, what would it be? And Perri, let's start with you.
Sure. So I would say that we see you and we hear you, and we would love to be in touch with you. If you want to learn more about StoryCorps or watch the animations or have access to our audio or record on your own. And so we encourage you to be in touch, and that's it.
Okay. And Maria?
I think I'm going to keep it very simple, is that keep the memories alive through storytelling, through photographs, through connecting with people.
Okay. I think that's a great place to end. So before we sign off here, Perri, where can listeners find the Road to Resilience Project and listen to some of the stories that you guys have recorded?
So you can find more information about StoryCorps on storycorps.org/road-to-resilience.
Okay, great. And I'll put the link in the show notes page too, so it's easier for people to find. And if people do want to download the StoryCorps app, I suppose, is it iPhone and Android both? And how do they get that?
Yep, and they can get it wherever they get their apps, but the iTunes Store has them as well.
Yeah, okay. And Maria, so where can listeners find the New York Life Foundation resources that you guys have on childhood bereavement?
So you can directly go to achildengrief.com, or you can go to newyorklifefoundation.org. Either one will lead you to bereavement resources and information about our initiatives.
Okay, all right, very good. And I'll put that in the show notes too. So thank you both so much. My guests today are Perri Chinalai from StoryCorps and Maria Collins from the New York Life Foundation. And so Maria and Perri, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with StoryCorps and the New York Life Foundation as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 28. I really do think this StoryCorps Road to Resilience project is fantastic, and I'm so happy I could bring you our discussion today. In fact, I think I said super cool a few too many times in the course of talking with Perri and Maria, but really that's just how great I think it is. I hope you'll take a look at the app or get in touch with one of their current partners if you happen to live nearby. And if you don't, then be on the lookout for their toolkit this fall and maybe show it to a grief center near you. And hey, if you do try a StoryCorps style recording in your family, drop me a line on my website, jennylisk.com. I'd love to hear how it goes. And please do share this episode with your friends and fellow widowed parents if you found it interesting. Thanks for listening. Until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.